Seventh grade, how's it going? We are getting through Jason and the Argonauts. This is week 3 of our distance learning. I love seeing you guys on the Zoom calls. I hope that everything is going well with your learning. This is going to be the last bit of grammar notes for this chapter, and we're going to continue on in some exercises this week. And then this week you're going to have your vocab quiz on Jason and the Argonauts. So keep studying that vocab. I know there's a lot of vocab this chapter. Keep at it, keep studying. Use Quizlet if it's helping. And what you're going to need for this video, since we're finishing our grammar notes, is you're going to need your notebook, you're going to need something to write with, and your textbook. To follow along, we're going to be picking up on page 216 with your Latin via Ovid book. So grab a pencil, go back to the grammar section of your notebook. I know things have been a little bit crazy, a little bit back and forth, where we've done grammar notes and then exercises back to grammar notes. So if you were able to skip enough pages for your grammar notes early on, then go back to that. If not, it's really okay if it's out of order. What I'm going to ask at the end of this chapter is that you find a way to scan or send photos of your notebook so I can see that you've been keeping up with everything, just like we do notebook checks in class. I'm going to do a notebook check at the end of the chapter on test day, so we got a couple more weeks till we get there, but just so you know what's coming. I am going to find a way to check your notebooks, even if it's not in person. So be keeping up with that. And like I said, if it's a little out of order, it's totally okay. It's your notebook. It's for your purposes and your studying. I just want to make sure all the content is there. So if you need to have some exercises and then some grammar notes, that's okay. But no matter what, get to some kind of place where you can take a few grammar notes. We just have a couple of concepts, real short. We're going to be talking about negative statements, and we're going to be talking about the adjective quidam, and we're going to be talking about some irregular adjectives, a few short things, and then we're moving on to some exercises. You guys did a lot last week. I know exercise 2 was just like full of charts, and I know that was a lot, but we are going to be moving forward with exercise 3 and 4 this week. And then, like I said, keep studying your vocab because your quiz is this Thursday. Hopefully that trial went okay. You got to kind of test out what the vocab quiz is going to be like so that you don't have any weird things when you actually have to take the quiz. You can kind of figure it out on your own with the test. So all that said, if you need to take a second to grab your stuff, pause the video. That's the great thing about this. If you're all ready, then let's keep going. We're going to take some grammar notes. Awesome. So if we're ready to move forward, the first thing we're talking about this chapter is the verb nego. So the verb we're totally comfortable with seeing when we're talking about speaking sentences is deco. You know, right out of the gate, we use dixit, which is the perfect tense, which is he, she, or it said. And we've seen that a lot. Anytime we have sentences, anytime we have statements, anytime we have dialogue, we come across that verb. We have this new verb that we're coming across in this chapter, nego. And this verb is just going to be used really similarly to deco, but instead of saying he said, it's going to be like he denied, or he said that blank is not true. So it's a negative statement, and it looks literally like the word negative, N-E-G-O, or when it's he, she, or it, negat, literally like to negate something. So if that helps you remember it. And so if you're following along in your notebooks on 216, it tells us that it's, instead of using deco, it's basically saying say that ... not. So instead of he says that, you know, Minerva is gonna turn you into a spider because she's really angry, it's gonna be saying she said that Minerva is not going to turn you into a spider. So it's a negative statement. It's denial. It can be translated as deny, or it can be translated as say that not. And so it emphasizes it here just because it's a commonly used verb. And it's a little bit weird to translate because it doesn't have a direct translation, because we don't necessarily say in our common English speaking terms, we don't say like, Jordan denies that this is true, or Jordan says that not, I like to learn Latin. I don't know. It's worded a little bit weirdly, and so it's emphasized here just so that we can recognize that there is this verb here that's new to us, that's commonly used in dialogue, but that it's a negating sentence. So something where that is saying it is not true. Sorry for using Jordan in my example. You know, you guys are just typically right in front of me, and that's the first one that popped into my head. So the next one, make a little note of that in your notebook. Just a little bit of note about that verb, that it's a negative sentiment, that it's a denial type verb. When we're talking about quotations, when we're talking about direct statements, it's a denial type verb. And then the next thing, we got 2 more things we're taking notes on in your notebook. I'll put some up on the board for you to see in a second. And this is an adjective that if you know the qui, qui, quo chart, then this is really easy because it's just adding a suffix to the end of the qui, qui, quo chart. That's one of those concepts that in Latin is so interesting that when we learn something, a lot of our knowledge is just building on that learning. So every time we learn a chart, later there's another chart that's just like that with a little bit of a change. And so the more solid we can make these charts in our mind when we learn them the first time, the better off we're going to be later on when we're just adding little things. And similarly, or conversely, if we struggle with learning the chart the first time, it's not really solid in our brain, then the next time we're trying to learn a chart that's built off of that, it's hard because we're building off of something that wasn't solid in the first place. I have tea this time instead of coffee because it's evening, but it's delicious. So the last thing in your grammar notes, for this section, we're talking about nego, so we're talking about a denial statement. We're writing the chart for quidam, 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 and then we are talking about a few irregular adjectives. So the last thing, so in your grammar notes, you'll have nego, you'll have the quidam, quidam, quidam chart that I just had up on the board, and then lastly, irregular adjectives. So if you want to follow along, again, I'm on page 216. It just tells us irregular adjectives: alter, alius, nullus, solus, totus, ullus, and unus. These 7 adjectives are irregular in the genitive and the dative case, singular only. So these aren't crazy irregular. They don't have totally different charts. It's only in the genitive and the dative singular. So that's it. All the other forms are just like those. Study the following example, and it gives you the chart there for solus. And so if you look to it, what we're used to seeing with something like solus would be us, e, o, e, orm, is, os, is, in the masculine. I, arm, is, as, is. In the neuter, e, o, e, orm, is, is. But if you notice here, and I'm going to put it up in just a second, but I'm going to talk you through it first. If you notice here, the genitive and the dative singular are different. And this is the case with some of our other words too: alter, alius, nullus. And so these words, only, other, none, any. So these are words that we're using a lot when we're qualifying things, we're describing things. But again, if you note your solus chart, instead of us, e, o in the singular, it actually goes us, e, o. And then in the feminine, a, us, e, a. And then in the neuter, us, e, o. So the interesting thing that is helpful is that the irregular part, the genitive and the dative singular, are the same across all genders. So that's a bonus. That's one helpful thing, because you're not learning like 3 new variants. But there is one variant in that us and e are going to be your genitive and your dative singular endings, no matter the gender, for these irregular adjectives. So make a note in your notebook that we've got alter, alius, nullus, solus, totus, ullus, unus. AANSTUU. There's got to be some kind of acronym we can come up with that. So there's 7 irregulars, and they all have an irregular genitive and dative. And so if we can come up with some way to remember that, if any of you come up with a creative way to memorize that, let me know and we'll share it with the class. Because that's kind of one of those things, just like when, there's a few first declension nouns that are masculine. It's just super weird. And it's just those weird things you got to learn and you got to memorize because they stick out and they've got differentiating factors. And so last thing for this part is I'm going to put that chart up on the board. Here you go. And anytime these are up here, guys, please feel free to pause the video and copy it down if you need to. That's one of the great things about this, like I said, is you can always pause anytime you need to. So copy it into your book. This is on 217, or copy it off the screen. But either way, put it into your notebook and emphasize, circle, highlight some way of differentiating the fact that the genitive and the dative case singular are different. So circle it, highlight it, mark it, put a star by it, put a weird fill-up face by it, whatever you you want to do. Make sure you pay attention in your notebook to the fact that this is different. Awesome. So once your grammar notes are done, we're moving on to a few exercises. First, I cannot believe that I did not realize that exercise 2 had a part D. And you guys are probably like, aha, we got out of it. You didn't. So this week we're picking up with exercise 2 part D. So 218 and right a little bit onto 219 are the exercises we're doing. So exercise 2 part D, which is really simple. There's just 5, and it tells us supply the correct forms of the verbs in the following sentence, meaning that the thing in parentheses, there's an English bit in parentheses to each Latin sentence, and you've got to translate that little bit. Real simple. Can't believe I missed it. Again, thought you probably had a free pass. You don't. You should know that by now. And then exercise 3 and 4 we're going to do. So exercise 3, complete the following sentences in indirect statement by supplying the correct infinitive. So remember last week we started talking about indirect statements and how in English we would say, he says that he is not going to the store, and how in Latin it would be translate, he says that he not to be going to the store. There's an infinitive use in there in terms of indirect statements. And so what you're dealing with here is the word in parentheses is not going to look like an infinitive in English, but it's actually going to translate into an infinitive in Latin. And so fortunately for you, because there are 25 of these you're working through, it does the first 3 for you. And so for example, number 1, it says dicunt puerum is filium regis. And so that is there is what you're translating into the infinitive. But what you're going to translate he is as in the infinitive form is actually going to be to be, because we're not putting he is in this sentence because it's an indirect statement. So we're actually putting to be into that sentence, which would be esse. And so look over those first 3 examples anytime you might get stuck, because that'll be helpful. And there's actually a few later on that it gives you some hints on. So always pay attention when the book gives you some extra hints, because those are really great. For example, when you get to 12 and 13, you'll see some extra hints there. So go ahead and complete those. And then exercise 4, again, these are real quick exercises, but supply the subject for each of the following infinitives in the indirect statements. And so those words again in parentheses is what you're translating. If you need to reference back to your direct and indirect statement, check your notebook or go back to 214. That tells us the subject here is always expressed in the accusative case. So for example, in exercise 4, the subject, when we're talking about indirect statements, does not go in the nominative the way it usually does. For indirect statements, it actually goes in the accusative. So indirect statements are all kinds of crazy because your verb doesn't have a subject the way it's used to, and your subject goes in the accusative case. So it's like your subject becomes the object and your verb becomes an infinitive. It's crazy town. But I think you guys can get it. And like I said, if you have any questions, that's what we have our Zoom call for. So finish up your grammar notes and move on to these exercises. Keep studying your vocab. And I'm real excited to see you guys soon. I know this was a short one this week. But that's great. Sometimes, it's not bad to have not a lot of work. Like I said, again, keep studying your vocab. I'll see you soon. Reach out if you have any questions. I would love to hear from you. And good luck with doing all of what you're doing. I hope you guys had a wonderful Easter. I will keep talking unless I turn this video off. But I miss you guys. I hope you're having a good time and a wonderful, blessed, experience at home with your families and able to find some fun and all this crazy. And I hope to see you guys soon.